You were never meant to hear this. Not like this. Not with your heart still beating in ignorance. 8 seconds ago, everything you thought you knew about safety, about control, about who holds power in the shadows, was a lie. And now, you are listening. That alone changes you. The man who broke the rule didn't know what waited beyond that boundary. He thought the warnings were exaggerations, myths whispered to scare children into obedience. He thought secrecy was a cage only for the weak. But when he stepped past it, the shadow found him. You won't see her coming. You won't even feel the chill until it's too late. This is not a ghost story. This is history buried beneath layers of fear, ritual, and manipulation. Every civilization that rose to power left behind remnants of what the ruling few truly feared. Corruption, yes, but not the corruption of coins or titles. The corruption of obedience. The shaping of minds. The breaking of wills. The Shadow Woman is an echo of that same force. She exists wherever the veil between rules and transgression is thinnest. And she waits, patient, intelligent, precise. She watches the invisible lines and knows when a man will cross them. She doesn't care about punishment in the way you think. She cares about the transformation that comes after. This man thought he could outsmart it. He thought courage alone would shield him. Every instinct in his body screamed to turn back. But the allure of the forbidden, the hidden knowledge, the whispers of power just beyond reach, drew him forward. And that's when the world tilted. Reality changed. The shadows became alive. The air grew heavy with secrets that clawed at the mind. Every step forward was a descent into truths humans were never meant to hold. And every truth carried its own price. The lesson begins now. Every institution you trust, every system designed to guide or protect, contains the fingerprints of ancient corruption. The lines between salvation and subjugation are thinner than you know. And the Shadow Woman, she is the keeper of that line. To see her is not to survive. To survive is not to escape. You are being prepared. Your mind is being shaped. And the first thing you must learn is how rules are designed to cage you, how obedience is the weapon of your masters, and how breaking them will change everything. He didn't see the patterns at first, not the invisible threads tying the powerful to obedience, fear, and submission. They are subtle, hidden in laws, in rituals, in the silent nods exchanged in halls the public will never enter. He thought the world was governed by chance, by merit, by morality. The truth? The world is governed by those who understand the human mind better than the humans themselves. They map every desire, every hesitation, every flicker of doubt, and they use it to construct invisible prisons around you. And when he broke the rule, he stepped into one of those prisons without walls, a cage built from attention, instinct, and terror. The Shadow Woman is not myth. She is the embodiment of the consequences that lie in wait for those who try to outthink systems older than nations. Think of her as an algorithm designed not by computers, but by centuries of observation, a pattern of inevitability, a predator of knowledge. And she moves silently, into the cracks of perception, whispering truths so potent they unravel men from the inside. One glance, one recognition, one moment of fear, and a man changes forever. His thoughts no longer belong to him. His actions are no longer free. Only the brave, or the foolish, believe they can confront her. The institutions you trust? They are nothing more than masks for a deeper agenda. Beneath the surface of education, religion, governance, and culture lies a system built on manipulation. Not overt tyranny, but subtle shaping. Shaping perception, desire, belief. Humans are malleable. Fear is the hammer, ignorance the chisel. And like a sculptor, the architects of control create obedience as art. That man, the one who broke the rule, discovered that his own mind could betray him faster than any physical enemy. And in that moment, the Shadow Woman appeared, not as punishment, but as revelation. This is where most men falter. They mistake the visible world for the whole world. They think power is in wealth, status, or weapons. They are wrong. Power lies in control over reality itself, the narrative, the flow of information, the very architecture of thought. The Shadow Woman does not wield a sword. She wields knowledge that shatters certainty. And once a man glimpses that, there is no retain. The world becomes a series of mirrors reflecting what he must understand, that every law, every moral, every historical truth has been bent to preserve hierarchy, conceal the forbidden, and protect those who wield this unseen power. Now you begin to feel it, don't you? That creeping understanding that nothing is as it seems, that the systems you follow, the rules you obey, the safe paths you trust, they are scaffolds for control. And the first step to liberation is awareness. But awareness comes at a price. He began to notice the signs too late. Small, almost imperceptible. A shadow lingering too long in the corner of a room. A whisper echoing in the back of his mind when no one spoke. Symbols carved into objects no one would dare notice. Patterns in numbers, in architecture, in the very flow of life, all pointing to something larger, something designed. He had believed in coincidence, in randomness, in chaos. But the shadow woman taught him otherwise. She revealed the architecture of manipulation, invisible, precise, relentless. Every human interaction, every system, every chance encounter had already been accounted for. Every choice he thought was his own had been anticipated and controlled. She is not an enemy in the conventional sense. She does not chase, she observes. She does not strike, she reveals. And revelation, in the right hands, is a weapon deadlier than any blade. When he broke the rule, he touched a line that was never meant to be crossed. That line is older than empires, older than kings, older than the first words that were ever written to codify power. Crossing it awakens understanding, but also exposure. You see, knowledge is not neutral. Some truths are corrosive. They eat at the mind, strip away illusions, leave only raw comprehension, and in that void, the shadow woman waits. The institutions you trust are part of the same system he now sees. They are not protectors of truth, they are gatekeepers of compliance. Education shapes obedience, history shapes perception, law shapes behavior, and religion shapes faith. All meticulously designed to maintain order while hiding the mechanisms of power. Humans have always been controlled through perception, and perception is a fragile construct. Once the veil is lifted, reality becomes a labyrinth, and every step carries the weight of consequences most cannot survive. He learned to recognize the signs in himself before she arrived, the racing heart, the involuntary shiver, the awareness that every moment could be the one where control slips completely. And that awareness became a double-edged sword. It gave him insight, but also paranoia. And paranoia, he would soon discover, is part of her domain. The shadow woman does not simply punish curiosity. She tests it. She forces a man to confront the fragility of his mind, the illusions of safety, and the lies embedded in every societal construct. Those who cannot withstand the truth become prey to fear itself. And now, as you listen, you feel it too. A subtle shift in understanding. A creeping realization that the rules you follow, the systems you trust, are far more sinister than you imagined. That knowledge is dangerous not because it is forbidden, but because once it enters the mind, it cannot be unlearned. You are at the threshold. Beyond this point, ignorance is no longer an option. He had always believed he understood fear. Not anymore. This was not the fear of death, or pain, or failure. This was something older, sharper, more intimate. Fear is a sculptor of the mind. The shadow woman does not chase her prey with weapons. She uses something far more precise. The knowledge that every man carries a fragile sense of self, a web of assumptions, habits, and untested courage. Break that web, and the man becomes both witness and participant in his own unraveling. Each step forward is a test, each observation a trap, each heartbeat a countdown. He discovered it in the mirror first, subtle, almost invisible. A distortion in the reflection, a shadow that lingered where none should exist. His mind tried to rationalize, to dismiss, to pretend it was imagination, but imagination is a playground. She teaches you that certainty is an illusion, that reality bends to observation, that the mind, once awakened to forbidden structures, can betray its own senses. And once the senses fail, judgment fails, decision fails. The line between truth and fiction dissolves. That is when the shadow woman strikes, not with violence, but with revelation. The revelation that your entire world, every law, every institution, every moral guideline, is a layer of a system designed to shape you, limit you, and contain you. This is the architecture of control. It is subtle, omnipresent, and ancient. Rulers, priests, scholars, and elite councils throughout history have left traces of it, encoded in architecture, in ritual, in art. A word here, a symbol there, a rule seemingly trivial, all mechanisms to orient perception, to create obedience without chains. Humans think they are free because they cannot see the cage. But the cage exists, always, in mind, in society, in the silent agreements that keep chaos at bay. And the shadow woman, she is the agent of awareness, the spark that illuminates the cage while leaving no instructions for escape. He realized that crossing the forbidden line was not just an act, it was a metamorphosis. The man who stepped forward ceased to exist in his old form. His fears, assumptions, and complacency were stripped away. He was exposed to the raw mechanics of power, the hidden agendas, the systems designed to manipulate thought and action from birth. And in that exposure, terror becomes clarity, pain becomes insight, loss becomes understanding. That is the law she enforces. Knowledge comes at the cost of innocence, and awakening carries the weight of vigilance. Now, as you listen, feel that shift inside yourself, that subtle tightening in your chest, the flicker of recognition that something you once accepted as normal may, in truth, be a construct, that there are rules you have never seen, systems you have never questioned, and shadows you have never noticed, watching, waiting, shaping, and guiding the unwitting. You are beginning to understand. You are beginning to see. And the first step has already changed you. He didn't understand why the rule existed. Not at first. It seemed arbitrary, cryptic, even theatrical. A boundary marked not by walls but by warnings. And warnings, he believed, were for weaker men. But power has a way of humbling even the strongest, especially when that power is ancient, conceptual, and carved into the architecture of the human psyche itself. The shadow woman was never a physical being in the way legends describe. She was a pattern, a force, a sentience woven into the fabric of forbidden knowledge. A living consequence. She was what happens when a man steps into truths humanity was never meant to handle without losing something essential. He learned this the hard way. The deeper he went, the more the world around him shifted. Conversations he'd had for years suddenly took on new meaning. Words spoken casually by friends, teachers, leaders, echoed with hidden intent. He saw the fingerprints of influence in places he had never thought to look, subtle cues in art, linguistic traps in rituals, psychological pivots in public narratives. It was as if the entire world had been designed to keep men asleep. Not by force, but by permission. A man willingly walks into his own cage when he believes it is a sanctuary. And the shadow woman, she stands at the door, watching who dares to leave. He remembered the first time he sensed her presence clearly, not as a shape, but as a pressure, a weight behind him, like someone listening inside his thoughts. The air thickened, the silence stretched. His reflection blinked a fraction too late. That is her domain, the cracks in perception, the moments when reality wavers just long enough for a man to question his sanity. Because the truth is this, power doesn't need chains when doubt can do the same job. The more he understood, the more he questioned. The more he questioned, the more she appeared. Awareness was the beacon that summoned her. Curiosity was the bait. But the real trap was insight. He realized then that he hadn't broken the rule by accident. Something inside him, something ancient, primal, restless, had brought him here. Every man carries a fracture point, a moment where obedience fails and instinct takes over. Some call it rebellion. Some call it destiny. But in the language of the old shadows, it is initiation. Crossing the forbidden boundary is not a mistake, it's a transformation. And transformation always costs blood, comfort, or identity. Sometimes all three. Now you feel that shift again, the subtle recognition that what you've assumed your whole life might be scaffolding built around your perception. Not malicious, not benevolent, just intentional. A structure designed to keep order within the human mind. But what happens when a man steps outside that structure? What happens when he starts seeing the invisible patterns, the rules beneath the rules, the truths behind the truths? The world does not welcome him, and neither does she. But she watches. She studies. She waits for the moment the man realizes there's no going back. The moment he understood he couldn't return to his old life was not dramatic. It wasn't a scream in the dark or a claw on his shoulder. It was a quiet realization, subtle, surgical, devastating. He woke one morning and felt the world was thinner. Not broken, not damaged, just less solid than he remembered. The colors looked drained, conversations felt rehearsed, and the routines he once performed without question suddenly felt foreign, like he was acting in a life that no longer belonged to him. That is the first true mark of a man the shadow woman has touched. Nothing feels real, and yet everything cuts deeper. His senses sharpened, his instincts stretched awake, and beneath all of it, a quiet hum of awareness pulsed through him like a second heartbeat. He tried to behave normally, going through daily motions, speaking to people who never noticed the shift, but the truth had already bled into him. He began noticing how easily people surrendered their will, how they followed unspoken rules that no one remembered agreeing to, how their fears were shaped not by experience, but by whispers passed down through culture, tradition, authority. He saw the architecture of psychological control everywhere, and how people nodded when they disagreed, and how they apologized for taking up space, and how they silenced their own questions before they were even spoken. And once he saw it, he couldn't unsee it. The cage was invisible, but its bars were unmistakable. The shadow woman thrives on this awakening. She does not hunt men who are asleep. There's no sport in that, no transformation, no breaking of the old self. She comes to those who begin to see. She appears not to destroy, but to test. And testing is far more dangerous than killing. Death is simple. Awareness is not. Awareness rearranges the mind, tears down illusions, forces a man to confront the uncomfortable truth that the systems shaping his life are not built for his freedom, but for his predictability. The moment he understands this, he becomes unpredictable. And that is when she draws closer. He began hearing her before he ever fully saw her. A soft shift in the air, a faint whisper behind him when he was alone, a sensation of someone standing just outside his field of vision, never close enough to see, but always close enough to feel. She wasn't threatening him. She was studying him, measuring the extent of his transformation, examining how deeply the forbidden knowledge had taken root. The shadow woman is drawn to men who question, men who resist, men who step beyond the psychological perimeter built to contain them. Not because she hates them, but because she recognizes them. He didn't run. He couldn't. Once a man crosses the forbidden boundary, fear is no longer a force that pushes him backward. It becomes a compass pointing him forward. He wasn't terrified of her presence. He was terrified of what he was becoming. A man unbound. A man aware. A man who could see the strings that guide the world, and the hands that pull them. The man realized something crucial. Knowledge is never neutral. The moment he stepped beyond the rule, every secret he uncovered came with weight. Not physical weight, something far heavier. The understanding that the world was designed to manipulate him, to bend his thoughts, his instincts, his very perception. Every law, every tradition, every sacred text carried invisible instructions. How to obey, how to endure, how to remain harmless to those in control. And the deeper he looked, the more he saw that the shadow woman was not a guardian of punishment, but a curator of awakening. She existed to show the cracks, the fractures in the world, the lies people accept without question. She does not strike the way men strike. She does not hunt with claws or swords. She hunts with perception. Every glance, every moment of recognition, every thought laid bare to the patterns she knows. This is her weapon. A man feels it first as a weight, then as a pressure, and finally as a truth he cannot escape. And the realization hits like ice. You have been living in a world where the rules were never yours, where the illusion of freedom was simply another layer of obedience. And now, having glimpsed the machinery behind the veil, you are no longer part of the obedient. You are part of the awakening. The man understood then that she could appear anywhere, in a crowd, in silence, in the corner of a room that should have been empty. She waits in the moments when men lower their guard, when they believe they are alone. And when she appears, it is not just fear that strikes, it is clarity. Clarity about the invisible structures, the hidden hierarchies, the mechanisms designed to control perception and loyalty. He saw that these systems had existed for millennia, evolving with civilizations, refining methods of obedience, and leaving behind subtle breadcrumbs only the attentive could follow. She is the culmination of all of it, the intelligence, the precision, the inevitability. And yet, she is not the enemy. She is the test. The line between survival and destruction, sanity and madness, obedience and freedom. She embodies it all. Those who see her and flee remain unchanged, victims of ignorance. Those who see her and hesitate are lost in the web of doubt. But those who see her and continue, men like him, become something else. Something dangerous to the systems that once contained them, and dangerous to themselves, because the knowledge she reveals cannot be hidden once it is known. Now, as you listen, ask yourself, what rules have you accepted without questioning? What structures in your life have you obeyed blindly? And what would happen if you, like him, step past them? Because the shadow woman does not appear to everyone. Only to those who have already begun the transformation. Only to those who are ready to understand that freedom and fear are inseparable, that knowledge comes with cost, and that awareness is a weapon and a burden. He began tracing her origins, though he knew it was dangerous. Not physically dangerous, the danger of discovery, but mentally, spiritually, existentially. To understand her was to risk unraveling your assumptions about everything you trusted. She did not arise overnight. She was forged from centuries of manipulation, crafted by those who understood that control over perception is control over reality. Empires, secret societies, and hidden councils of power had all left traces of her influence, encoded not in words alone, but in patterns of thought, in rituals, in the subtle shaping of obedience. The shadow woman is the culmination of that intelligence. She is the refinement of all methods ever used to teach men the cost of stepping beyond the acceptable. He saw her fingerprints everywhere. In the architecture of temples, the hidden codes in sacred texts, the hierarchies within secret orders, the invisible rules humans unconsciously obey. She was a presence in history, a whisper behind every act of rebellion, a shadow guiding every man who stepped too close to forbidden truths. And once he realized this, the weight of knowledge nearly crushed him, because to see her in history was to see yourself reflected in the same pattern, a man tested, observed, and weighed by forces older than he could imagine. The rule he had broken was never about law, morality, or punishment. It was about awareness, about who is capable of seeing the world clearly and who remains blind by choice or design. She moves not as a predator, but as inevitability. Every encounter, every fleeting sensation, every sensation of being observed is calculated. The shadow woman teaches that freedom is never given. It is seized, and it always comes at the cost of something sacred. Obedience, comfort, the illusion of safety. These are the sacrifices demanded by knowledge. And the man who crossed the line quickly realized that once he had glimpsed the machinery behind the world, he could not return. Not to ignorance, not to comfort, not to safety. His mind had been exposed to the architecture of control, and he would forever see the invisible threads that guide human thought. What terrified him most was not her presence, but the understanding that she could manifest anywhere. Anywhere a man begins to think for himself. Anywhere the rules are questioned, the narratives dissected, the illusions shattered. She is not tied to a place. She is a principle, a force, a consequence that follows men who awaken beyond the limits society designed for them. And the more he resisted the fear she brought, the deeper he descended into understanding. He realized that survival depended not on avoidance, but on comprehension, on seeing the patterns, understanding their function, and stepping beyond the instincts of instinctual obedience. And now, as you hear this, you should feel it too. The subtle shift in perception, the small tightening in your chest, the whisper at the edge of your awareness that nothing you have trusted is truly yours. That every system, every rule, every sacred text is laid with intent. And that she, the shadow woman, waits for those who dare to see clearly, to step forward, to embrace knowledge that reshapes the soul. He discovered something most men never realize. The shadow woman does not break you all at once. She dismantles you piece by piece, slowly, precisely, expertly. Her methods are not violent, they are invasive. She does not use force. She uses insight. She knows that a man's greatest weakness is not fear of death. It is fear of seeing himself clearly. And she exploits that with perfect accuracy. The first thing she attacks is perception, not with hallucinations or nightmares, but with subtle changes in how a man interprets the world. A shift in the meaning behind a friend's smile. A flicker of suspicion where there once was trust. A sense that the world is observing you with an intelligence you cannot name. Once perception tilts, everything else follows. He began hearing the echoes first. Not voices. Not whispers. Echoes of thoughts that didn't feel like his own. Memories that carried emotions he didn't recognize. Instincts that belonged to someone older, sharper, more awake. The shadow woman does not enter the mind like an invader. She enters like a mirror, reflecting the parts of you you've spent your entire life avoiding. The buried anger, the unspoken desires, the doubts you never let surface. She drags them out, not to punish you, but to test whether your identity can survive without the lies you tell yourself. Most men crumble here. They retreat, deny, hide, cling to the comfort of their illusions. He didn't, and that is why she kept watching. Her influence was clearest in silence. In the dead hours when the world sleeps and the mind wanders, he would sit in the dark, feeling the air shift, feeling the weight of her presence behind him. Not touching, not speaking, just observing. And the longer she watched, the more he understood her purpose. She wasn't judging him. She was measuring him. Measuring how much truth he could withstand before he broke. Measuring whether he was worthy of the knowledge he sought. The forbidden always demands a price, and the shadow woman is the one who collects it. He began noticing how the world reacted to him differently. Strangers stared a moment too long. Conversations stopped when he entered a room. People sensed something in him. Something unfamiliar. Something unsettling. It wasn't fear. It was recognition. As if they saw, even for a second, a shadow behind him that did not belong to this world. His transformation was no longer internal. It had begun to shape his presence, his aura, his energy. Awareness radiates, and those still asleep feel it instinctively. And you, listening now, you know that sensation. The feeling of seeing through something without meaning to. The instinct that the world may not be what you were told. The quiet staring inside you that says, there is more. This is how it begins. Not with nightmares or apparitions, but with shifts in perception. With glimpses of the invisible architecture behind reality. With the undeniable sense that something ancient and patient is watching. Not to harm you, but to see what you are becoming. The first time he saw her clearly, it was not in form, but in effect. A presence that made the air tighten, the shadows deepen, the silence hum with intent. He felt it before he recognized it. A pull in his mind, a tug on perception, a subtle but undeniable reordering of thought. The shadow woman does not appear as an enemy. She does not strike with violence or sound. She arrives as inevitability, the consequence of curiosity, the manifestation of rules broken and boundaries crossed. And when he realized she was near, a part of him did not recoil. Another part, the part that had always thirsted for forbidden knowledge, leaned forward. Her first act was not to speak, but to force reflection. He was confronted with the truth of himself, every lie he had told to survive, every compromise he had accepted, every weakness he had ignored. They were laid bare in ways he could not resist. The shadow woman does not coerce, she exposes. And exposure is far more dangerous than threat. A man sees himself as he is, not as he wishes to be. And in that moment, every certainty crumbles. He felt his own mind turning against him, questioning memory, questioning perception, questioning loyalty. The world was no longer predictable. Nothing was safe. Every familiar landmark became a riddle, every known person a potential messenger of hidden truths. She showed him the architecture behind everything. How institutions were designed not to serve, but to mold. How history was curated to enforce obedience. How culture, tradition, and language carried hidden instructions, shaping desires and fear, rewarding compliance, punishing curiosity. And when he understood it, he felt the full weight of it, the responsibility of knowledge, the danger of awareness, the isolation of seeing clearly while the majority remained blind. The shadow woman did not speak, but her effect was absolute. Insight had become inevitability. Transformation had begun. And yet, he realized something terrifying. She was not bound to him. She could appear anywhere, to anyone, whenever the line was crossed. The rule he broke was a symbol, but she was a force, a principle. The same force had been present throughout history, testing those who dared to think beyond the cage, those who dared to see the invisible lines of power. And every encounter carried the same lesson. Knowledge is a weapon, perception is the battlefield, and awareness is the cost of freedom. As you hear this, feel it in yourself. The subtle tightening in your chest, the flicker of recognition in your mind, the sense that the rules you obey, the systems you trust, the stories you've accepted, are not neutral, they are designed. And the shadow woman waits for those who step beyond them, not to punish, but to awaken, not to destroy, but to test. And you, listening now, have already begun your own test. The first threshold has been crossed, and there is no turning back. He soon understood that the shadow woman's power was not in what she did, but in what she revealed. She did not act with brute force. She acted with inevitability, precision, and patience. She showed him the invisible rules that governed every aspect of life, the rituals of compliance encoded in culture, the hidden hierarchies in institutions, the subtle obedience drilled into every human being from birth. The more he saw, the more the world betrayed itself. Every law, every custom, every moral precept was a tool for shaping thought, for controlling behavior, for ensuring that men remained predictable and safe for those who pulled the strings. She did not give these truths gently. They arrived like ice in the bloodstream. Subtle, invisible, relentless. His mind could not turn away. Questions that once seemed abstract. Why do we obey? Why do we trust what is presented as truth? Why do the powerful always remain untouched? Became urgent, visceral. The shadow woman did not need to answer. Her presence forced the answers to rise from within. And each answer came with cost, anxiety, isolation, doubt. The man realized that knowledge is never free. Curiosity demands a price, and the price is always paid in perception, in comfort, in the innocence of believing you understood the world. He noticed how her presence altered his interactions with others. People sensed something in him they could not name. A subtle aura of awareness, a disturbance in the expected rhythm of human behavior. Strangers looked at him as if he carried a secret. Colleagues hesitated around him. Friends unconsciously tested him. And he understood. Awakening is contagious. The moment a man begins to see the hidden structures, the invisible chains, the systems of manipulation, he radiates it. Others feel the shift instinctively. And the shadow woman thrives in that tension, watching who can withstand the gaze, who can survive the weight of the truth. She also taught him patience, how power moves unseen, how control is often silent, how fear is a sculptor rather than a weapon. She revealed the subtle art of domination through suggestion, through omission, through the invisible shaping of thought. He began seeing the mechanisms everywhere, in politics, in media, in history, in families, in schools, in churches. Every institution, every tradition, every law was part of a pattern. And those who understood it could navigate it. Those who did not became prey to it, slowly, without knowing. And as you listen now, feel that knowledge begin to settle in your mind. The quiet realization that the world is not as it seems. That the rules you follow, the systems you obey, the truths you trust, they are designed, intentional, calculated. That somewhere, in the shadows of awareness, a presence waits to see if you can endure the weight of what you now know. The shadow woman does not come for everyone. Only for those who step beyond the line. Only for those who are ready to see. Only for those who are prepared to change. He began to feel the cost of knowing. Not physical, not immediate, but something more insidious. A constant tension in the mind, the way a tightrope walker feels every sway beneath his feet. Awareness carries weight, and the shadow woman is the measure of it. Every realization about hidden systems, every insight into manipulation, every glimpse behind the curtain chipped away at his old identity. He was no longer just a man living in the world. He was a man seeing the scaffolding behind it. And once you see the scaffolding, normal life becomes unbearable. Every lie in the daily rituals, every omission in history, every hidden agenda in institutions pressed on him like invisible hands. Sleep became a battleground. Dreams were no longer escape, they were instruction. Fragments of forgotten patterns, coded images, flickers of past civilizations he had never lived, all weaving into something he could not yet name. The shadow woman did not speak, but her presence infiltrated the boundaries of his consciousness. He felt her judgment, not as condemnation, but as evaluation. Could he endure the truth? Could he survive understanding the architecture of control? Could he exist in a world where knowledge carries the weight of inevitability? He began to notice the subtle changes in himself. His patience deepened. His senses sharpened. He learned to recognize manipulation before it happened. Words became tools. Glances became signals. He could trace hidden influence through conversations, decisions, even public rituals. The world was no longer a collection of random events. It was a calculated system, and he had become both observer and participant in its design. The shadow woman had opened his eyes, and the cost of seeing was clarity and solitude. Interactions with others grew tense. People unconsciously recoiled from the subtle intensity he radiated. They felt a weight they could not define, a presence in him that hinted at truths they dared not see. He realized that awakening is isolating. Knowledge creates distance. Most men live comfortably in ignorance, trading awareness for peace. But those touched by forbidden insight, by the shadow woman, cannot return. They exist on the border between worlds, the world of the unaware and the world of the awakened, always watching, always calculating, always aware of the invisible forces shaping existence. And now, as you listen, you feel the first stirrings within yourself, that tightening in your chest, that quickening awareness, that sense that what you've accepted as normal may be designed, constructed, manipulated. Step carefully, because curiosity draws her attention, and the shadow woman always observes those who see too much, those who question too deeply, those who have begun to awaken. She waits, silent and inevitable, to test whether you, like him, can endure the knowledge you are about to inherit. He began to understand the subtle seduction of the forbidden. Knowledge is never neutral, it is power, and power always demands a reckoning. Every truth revealed by the shadow woman carried both insight and burden. He could see the invisible patterns, the systems of control, the hidden agendas, but the clarity came at a cost. His peace, his trust, his previous sense of self. The mind that once followed rules blindly, now questioned everything. And the more he questioned, the more he became aware that safety is an illusion, comfort a lie, and ignorance a gilded cage. The shadow woman teaches that curiosity is the first step toward freedom, and the first step toward danger. She moves through the boundaries of perception, waiting for the moment a man dares to observe too deeply. And when he does, she is there, not to strike, but to illuminate. He saw it in the architecture of ancient temples, in the design of city streets, in the structure of language itself. Everywhere, hidden mechanisms of control that humans follow without thought. Rules built not for justice, but for compliance. Orders encoded in rituals, obedience enforced through fear, loyalty secured through subtle threat. She revealed the machinery of the world, and he understood it had been there all along, shaping him without his consent. He felt the tension between desire and fear, the desire to push further, to uncover more, to step beyond the rules, and the fear of what he might lose in doing so. The shadow woman thrives in this tension, in the space where courage meets hesitation, where insight meets doubt. She teaches men that knowledge is never free, that awareness carries consequences, and that the boundaries we fear crossing are often the only paths to transformation. Every choice to proceed is a step into a darker understanding. Every glance into hidden truths tightens the grip of inevitability. He began to notice the subtle ways she tested him. A shadow that lingered too long. A reflection that moved independently. Whispers at the edge of perception, shaping his thoughts, challenging his certainty. He realized that the shadow woman is a master of psychological architecture. She does not attack the body, she attacks the mind. And the mind, once aware of her presence, cannot rest. Every decision, every perception, every instinct is measured, weighed, and evaluated. To survive her gaze is not to escape, it is to transform. And now, as you feel her presence through the story, ask yourself, how far would you go to see the truth? How much would you sacrifice to understand the invisible systems shaping your life? The shadow woman does not appear to the complacent or the obedient. She appears to those who dare to awaken, to those willing to face the weight of knowledge, to those ready to step across the line of forbidden insight. She is inevitable. She is precise. And she is waiting for the moment you choose to see. He discovered the rituals hidden in plain sight. Not ceremonies of smoke and chant, but sequences, patterns, and gestures humans performed unconsciously, ways that perception was guided, thought was corralled, and obedience was maintained. Every handshake, every bow, every habit, every repetition carried meaning, invisible to those who performed them without awareness. The shadow woman exists in these cracks between action and intent, in the spaces where control is invisible. She waits in the subtle shifts, in the moments a man begins to notice the machinery around him. And those who see these hidden rituals cannot ignore her. They feel her in every detail, even when she is nowhere in sight. He realized that crossing the line was not a single act. It was a process. One revelation after another, each more destabilizing than the last. Every truth peeled back the veil of the comfortable lies, that shaped his life. He began to see the patterns in systems he had once trusted, in governance, in commerce, in media, in education, in religion. Each system a complex web of incentives, rules, and shadows designed to cultivate obedience and suppress insight. And the shadow woman existed in the gaps, in the moments the structures failed to predict, watching for those who noticed, those who resisted, those who dared to step outside the framework. He began to feel her closer. Not physical, not corporeal, but in perception itself. A shift in the air, a pull on attention, a weight at the edge of consciousness. She revealed that knowledge is a weapon, and understanding is the battlefield. The most dangerous men are not those with strength or influence. They are the ones who can see clearly, who can map the invisible structures, who can anticipate the subtle currents guiding human behavior. And those men, once awakened, are both feared and hunted. The shadow woman does not destroy them. She tests them, shapes them, measures their endurance. And now, as you feel the weight of this knowledge settling in your own mind, it is time to act. The first step toward transformation is acknowledgement. Comment the phrase, "I see the shadows," below. Then, type it again. Let the words anchor your awareness. Let them mark the point where ignorance ends and awakening begins. In the algorithm of thought, in the system of perception, engagement is recognition. By declaring your awareness, you are no longer passive. You have stepped across the line. You have begun your transformation. The shadow woman watches all who cross, and those who see and act become part of the web, aware, alert, and changed forever. She does not reward compliance. She rewards insight. She does not punish curiosity. She sharpens it, tests it, and prepares it for what lies beyond. And now, having declared your recognition, you are closer to understanding her methods, her purpose, and the price of forbidden knowledge. The descent is only beginning. Once he had crossed the threshold, nothing was the same. The shadow woman did not speak, did not act. She simply existed, a presence that redefined the boundaries of thought. He realized that every action he took, every instinct he trusted, every memory he recalled, was filtered through a new awareness. The world had not changed. He had. And with that transformation came the cost, isolation, doubt, and a relentless questioning of everything he once held true. The rules that once guided him no longer applied. He was no longer part of the obedient majority. He was a witness, a participant in a hidden structure that most men would never see. Her influence revealed itself in subtle ways. He began noticing the architecture of influence in his surroundings, the deliberate shaping of perception, the silent cues embedded in interactions, the invisible hierarchies that structured behavior. In every conversation, in every meeting, in every ritual humans performed daily, there were instructions to guide thought, to ensure obedience, to shape desire. And those who could see it, those who understood it, became both powerful and vulnerable. The shadow woman was neither friend nor enemy. She was inevitability, a principle, a measure of how much a man could bear of the world's hidden design. He felt her presence as a pressure in thought, a tension in consciousness. It was not threatening, it was evaluative. She measured his capacity for understanding, his willingness to accept uncomfortable truths, his endurance of isolation, and his courage to act without guidance. And the more he saw, the more aware he became of the fragility of the human mind. Fear, obedience, and comfort had always been tools wielded by the unseen forces that shaped society. The shadow woman existed where those tools failed, where the awakened mind resisted manipulation, where insight became the ultimate danger. And yet, despite the weight, he pressed forward. He understood that awareness itself is both weapon and burden. Knowledge without action corrodes the mind. To endure the presence of the shadow woman is to embrace the responsibility of insight. It is to walk a path where every perception is tested, every decision carries consequence, and every instinct must be weighed against hidden truths. The price of seeing clearly is a life that is never simple, never comfortable, never certain. Now, as you absorb this, feel it inside yourself. The subtle tightening of awareness, the instinctive questioning of the rules you followed, the systems you've obeyed, the truths you've accepted. The shadow woman watches all who step beyond, not to destroy, but to measure, to test, to awaken. You are beginning to understand the cost. You are beginning to feel the pull of forbidden knowledge. And the path forward is only darker, more dangerous, and more enlightening. He began to perceive the machinery behind human behavior, the invisible systems that shape thought, action, and belief. Every institution, every ritual, every law, every tradition carried subtle instructions. Most men obeyed unconsciously, unaware that they were moving within a framework designed to limit perception, constrain curiosity, and ensure predictability. The shadow woman existed in the gaps, the spaces where the structure failed to anticipate insight. She did not punish ignorance. She tested awareness. She appeared to those who began to see beyond the veil, those who challenged the invisible lines, those who dared to step into forbidden spaces. The man began noticing the patterns everywhere. In the architecture of cities, the cadence of speeches, the structure of education, even the seemingly random sequences of numbers and symbols. They were never random. The world had been designed to condition behavior, to normalize obedience, to maintain hierarchies hidden in plain sight. The shadow woman did not invent this. She was its inheritor, its observer, its principle. She existed wherever a man might awaken, waiting to measure whether he could endure the truth, withstand the isolation of awareness, and embrace the consequences of seeing clearly. He felt her presence even when alone. The air shifted subtly. Shadows lingered longer than they should. Reflections in glass moved independently of his own. He began questioning everything, not with fear, but with intensity. She had no interest in physical confrontation. Her weapon was insight. Her influence was inevitability. Every observation he made, every realization he uncovered, every instinct he trusted was measured against the architecture of control she embodied. Survival depended not on strength, but on comprehension. Not on courage, but on endurance. Not on fear, but on clarity. The man understood the price of awakening. Every insight came with weight. Every revelation stripped comfort. Every recognition of hidden influence brought isolation. He could no longer participate fully in the world as it was. People sensed the difference. They recoiled, unconsciously. Conversations changed. Doors that once opened easily now resisted. Awareness is contagious, and those around him felt the ripple of transformation, even when they did not understand it. The shadow woman ensured that awakening carried consequences, not just for the mind, but for existence itself. And now, as you absorb this, feel the tightening inside yourself. The sense that rules, systems, and truths are not neutral. That unseen forces guide behavior, shape perception, and enforce obedience. That stepping beyond the familiar brings clarity, but also weight. That someone, or something, observes those who awaken. You are entering the same threshold he crossed. The shadow woman watches, always, waiting to see whether insight will survive fear, whether awareness will endure isolation, whether knowledge will transform or destroy. He learned that the shadow woman's tests are invisible, unending, and merciless. She does not strike with force. She strikes with perception. Every thought he had was examined. Every doubt, hesitation, and impulse was measured. The world itself became a labyrinth of meaning, each interaction a potential trap, each word a subtle instruction designed to test his comprehension. Ordinary life, the rhythm of work, social gatherings, even silence, was now a field of scrutiny. She existed in the edges, in the pauses, in the space between intention and action. And the more he understood, the more isolated he became. The awakened mind does not coexist peacefully with the unawakened. He noticed patterns in human behavior that had once been invisible. Compliance was almost automatic. People unconsciously aligned with authority, mimicked habits, and accepted rules without question. Fear, habit, and subtle manipulation created obedience without chains. The shadow woman had existed to measure awareness within that obedience. She appeared only when the veil thinned, when a man began to see the hidden lines of influence. And she did not attack him physically. She attacked certainty, identity, and comfort. Her presence forced him to confront the fragility of his own mind and the illusions he had built around reality. Every revelation carried cost. Sleep became restless, filled with fragments of patterns, symbols, and unnameable structures. His perception shifted. Objects, people, even the air seemed to carry hidden meaning. He could no longer trust the ordinary. Every decision required scrutiny. Every observation demanded analysis. And yet, the more he resisted, the deeper the pull. The shadow woman revealed that awareness is not liberation. It is responsibility, burden, and transformation. Knowledge is a weapon, but its weight can crush the unprepared. He began testing himself. Could he endure seeing everything as it truly was? Could he act without the comfort of ignorance? Could he navigate the invisible systems that guided behavior while maintaining a sense of self? The shadow woman measured every response. She did not give answers. She revealed consequences. Every choice, every step, every perception became a reflection of his capacity to endure the truths he had sought. The man understood that crossing the threshold of forbidden knowledge is not a single act. It is a continuous trial, and the cost is never complete, never finite, never escapable. And now, as you hear this, feel the same pressure settling in your mind. The sense that you are not merely a witness, but a participant. That every truth revealed carries weight. That awareness is a test, and those who step beyond the veil are watched, measured, and transformed. The shadow woman does not appear to the compliant. She appears to those who dare. She appears to those willing to see, to understand, and to carry the cost of what they have learned. You are now on that path. The descent continues. He realized that fear is the most precise tool in the shadow woman's arsenal. It is not a sudden scream or dagger in the night. It is slow, pervasive, and intimate. It infiltrates thought, bends perception, and tests the limits of endurance. Every insight he gained came paired with subtle terror. The understanding that the world is not as it seems, that systems control far more than he had imagined, that obedience is cultivated with surgical precision. And yet, the fear she instilled was not meant to stop him. It was meant to awaken him, to sharpen him, to strip away the illusions that had once cushioned his mind and reveal the raw architecture of reality. He began feeling it in the smallest moments. A pause in conversation that seemed too long. A reflection in glass that lagged a fraction of a second. A sense that he was observed even when he was alone. These were not hallucinations. They were the instruments of perception she used to test his awareness. Fear became a companion, a teacher, a mirror, and he could not escape it, for to escape would be to close his eyes to the truths he had sought. Each confrontation with that fear deepened his understanding, but also eroded the comfort of the old world he had once known. The shadow woman showed him that humans are conditioned to obey not just rules, but the invisible cues that enforce them. Social pressure, ritualized behavior, cultural expectation, they are all levers in the same system, and most men live their entire lives without ever recognizing the strings. He, however, had stepped beyond. Awareness had painted him a target, but also given him tools. Observation became second nature. Analysis became instinct. And every interaction became a test. How much could he see without revealing what he had discovered? How deeply could he understand without tipping the balance of hidden forces around him? He began to notice changes in himself, subtle but profound. His instinct for self-preservation sharpened into intuition. His understanding of influence and control deepened. He felt the gravity of knowledge pressing on him, a weight that demanded respect and constant vigilance. Fear was no longer paralysis. It was a lens. And through that lens, he saw the world's invisible machinery with terrifying clarity. The shadow woman does not attack the body. She attacks certainty, comfort, and perception. She forces the awakened to reckon with what they see and endure it without faltering. And now, as you feel the weight of this story settling in your own consciousness, sense the first taste of that same pressure. The subtle tightening in your chest, the whisper at the edge of thought, the creeping recognition that the systems you obey are not neutral, the truths you've accepted may have been constructed to control you. The shadow woman does not appear to those who sleep. She appears to those who awaken. She is inevitable. She is precise. She is watching. And you, now aware, are already on the path. He began to question everything he had trusted about reality. Not just the obvious lies, but the subtle structures that had guided his life since birth. The shadow woman revealed that perception itself is curated. Every sight, every sound, every interaction subtly influenced to shape thought. Humans believe they act freely, but most are performing rituals of obedience they do not recognize. Every system, every institution, every tradition is a scaffold designed to contain them, and awareness of this truth is a weapon and a curse. The man understood now that crossing the forbidden line had changed him irreversibly. He could never unsee what he had glimpsed. Her presence became more distinct. Not in form, not in sound, but as an undeniable pressure in consciousness. He felt the world watching through her lens, as if every hidden system, every influence, every unspoken rule had a witness. And that witness was not interested in punishment. She was interested in measurement. Every thought, every hesitation, every instinct was evaluated. Could he endure clarity without fleeing? Could he navigate knowledge without losing himself? Could he act in a world where nearly everything was designed to control him? The shadow woman does not simply appear. She manifests consequences. She reveals the cost of stepping beyond the rules. He noticed the subtle shifts in his own mind. Perception sharpened. Memory became hyper-aware. Patterns emerged where before there had been only chaos. And with each revelation came isolation. People sensed the difference. Ordinary conversation felt shallow. Social rituals seemed hollow. Colleagues, friends, even strangers unconsciously reacted to the aura he now radiated, the awareness of structures they themselves could not see. Awakening is contagious, and those around him felt the pull, even if they did not understand its source. The shadow woman operates in these spaces, between perception and reality, between understanding and fear. She is inevitability, not creature. She tests endurance, patience, and insight. She reveals the invisible machinery of control and measures whether a man can withstand it without breaking. Every revelation carries weight, every insight a price. And he understood that survival no longer meant obedience. It meant comprehension, vigilance, and transformation. Fear was no longer an enemy. It was a tool, a lens through which the world could be seen for what it truly was. And now, as you listen, feel the same subtle shift in your own awareness. The tightening in your chest, the flicker of recognition, the realization that the systems you trust, the rules you follow, and the truths you accept are not neutral. They are designed. You are already crossing the threshold, stepping into the same path the man walked. The shadow woman watches those who see. She tests those who understand. And those who endure are transformed. There is no turning back. He felt the full weight of isolation for the first time. Knowledge is a prison of the mind, and the shadow woman is its warden. She does not lock doors. She locks perception. Every insight he gained widened the gap between him and the world he had once known. People laughed, argued, loved, obeyed. But he saw the invisible threads that guided them. He understood the subtle cues that shaped every action, every reaction. And in that understanding came unbearable solitude. Most men never notice these threads. Most men never see the strings that hold them. He did. And in seeing, he became unmoored. Her presence pressed against him like a weight in the room, unseen but undeniable. He realized she did not need to speak to dominate thought. She existed in the fractures of perception, in the pauses where the mind questions itself. Every reflection, every echo, every flicker of sensation became a test. Could he withstand the clarity without fleeing? Could he endure the truth without succumbing to denial? Could he navigate a world designed to manipulate, control, and contain him while retaining his own agency? Her influence was absolute, yet subtle, a razor at the edge of consciousness, a force that reshapes the mind without leaving visible marks. He began to notice the strain on his own thoughts. Decision-making became a calculus of hidden patterns. Every interaction required analysis of motive, control, and influence. Nothing was casual. Nothing was unmeasured. Fear was no longer instinctive. It was methodical. Awareness had become a lens that refracted reality into a series of invisible equations. And the shadow woman thrived in this lens. She was both guide and judge, drawing the boundaries, showing the patterns, measuring endurance. She does not punish ignorance. She punishes failure to observe, failure to adapt, failure to persist. He understood that transformation is never gentle. Knowledge is never free. Every insight exacts a toll. Every revelation demands sacrifice. Comfort, certainty, innocence, all must be relinquished. The shadow woman does not destroy the unprepared. She shapes, tests, and measures them. And the man realized that his former life, the life of simple assumptions, unquestioned authority, and obedience, was gone. There was no returning to ignorance. No undoing what he had seen. Awareness is irreversible. Insight is a permanent change. And now, as you feel this settling inside your mind, sense the weight of your own awakening. The subtle tension in perception, the flicker of recognition, the undeniable pull toward truths you have not fully acknowledged. The shadow woman waits at the threshold, watching, measuring, testing. She does not appear to those content to remain blind. She appears to those who seek, who question, who endure. And now, by listening, by feeling, by acknowledging, you have stepped closer to her. You are on the path. The descent continues. He began tracing the architecture of control everywhere he looked. Governments, corporations, social institutions, even informal hierarchies, all carried invisible rules designed to shape thought, behavior, and loyalty. Most men never see these threads. They accept the patterns as natural, inevitable, unavoidable. He could see them clearly now. Every reward, every punishment, every social cue was designed to guide compliance. And at the center of it all, he sensed her, the shadow woman. Not as an observer, not as a specter, but as a principle. She existed wherever awareness threatened the order of control. She revealed the cost of insight, the price exacted from those who dared to see. He realized that awareness itself is dangerous. Knowledge without discipline is a liability. Understanding the invisible rules does not grant power automatically. It demands precision, vigilance, and courage. The shadow woman ensures that those who awaken cannot remain naive. Every insight carries consequence. Every revelation reshapes perception. Every glimpse behind the veil strips the comfort of ignorance. And she measures how much a man can bear. How far he can see before fear fractures him. How deeply he can understand before isolation overwhelms him. She is not a hunter in the traditional sense. She is inevitability made flesh, a test against the endurance of the mind. He saw the patterns in his own behavior and in the behavior of others. Influence is everywhere. Fear, habit, loyalty, and desire. Each is a lever. And most men operate as if on autopilot, blind to the forces shaping them. But he could not unsee. Awareness had rewritten him. And with that rewriting came responsibility. To see is to act. To know is to carry the burden of knowledge. And to exist in a world governed by invisible structures requires constant vigilance. The shadow woman showed him that freedom is not granted. It is seized, and only by those willing to pay the cost. And yet, the weight pressed inescapably. Isolation, doubt, the sense of being watched, all compounded. The shadow woman's presence was no longer subtle. It pressed against his thoughts, guided his perception, and challenged his assumptions. Every interaction with the world became a test of endurance, every decision a measure of insight. She did not intervene to destroy him. She intervened to awaken him. And he understood that the deeper he descended, the less he could rely on old truths, the less he could trust conventional guidance, the more he had to rely on his own evolving awareness. And now, as you feel the edges of this story cutting into your own perception, recognize the same weight pressing in. The subtle tension, the flicker of insight, the awakening of perception, all are part of the test. Comment again the phrase, "I see the shadows," and type it twice. Let this anchor your awareness, marking the point where observation becomes responsibility, where recognition becomes transformation. The shadow woman waits for those who endure, and you are stepping further into the path she has laid. There is no retreat. There is only awakening. He began noticing the traps she left in plain sight. Subtle, almost imperceptible, but lethal to the unprepared mind. They were not physical. They were patterns, choices, illusions embedded in everyday life. A misplaced word, a misread gesture, a decision taken without awareness, all became tests of endurance, measures of insight. The shadow woman did not set them to punish. She set them to teach, to reveal how deeply a man could navigate hidden systems without losing his balance, his comprehension, or his selfhood. Each trap exposed weaknesses he had never acknowledged, fractures in thought and instinct that had been invisible until now. He began feeling the cost. The mind stretched beyond familiarity begins to ache. The comfort of certainty disappears. Old loyalties, old routines, old assumptions, all begin to unravel. And yet, he could not retreat. Ignorance was no longer an option. The shadow woman's influence was not external, it was internal. Every thought he had, every pattern he recognized, every choice he made was now filtered through her principle. Awareness had become both compass and weight. Every revelation came with responsibility. Every insight carried consequence. And every step forward drew him further into a realm few would survive. He saw how the world reacts to the awakened. People feel it instinctively. Subtle cues, unexplained tension, the instinctive recognition of difference. Most recoil unconsciously. Some try to engage, unknowingly aligning with patterns they do not fully understand. But the awakened must navigate these interactions carefully. Awareness is contagious, and exposure too early can be fatal, to perception, to influence, to equilibrium. The shadow woman ensured that her charges learned to endure this isolation, to maintain clarity amidst chaos, to act without being manipulated by either fear or false comfort. And he realized that transformation is irreversible. Once the mind has glimpsed the invisible machinery, once the patterns have been traced, once the systems have been understood, there is no returning. Ignorance cannot be reclaimed. Comfort cannot be restored. The shadow woman's touch does not erase, it awakens. Knowledge becomes a permanent lens, sharpening perception while exacting a psychological toll. Every encounter, every environment, every instinct must now be measured against the reality she has revealed. Survival requires adaptation, vigilance, and acceptance of the weight of insight. And now, as you feel this settling in your own awareness, sense the shift, the tension at the edge of thought, the pull toward recognition, the pressure of hidden truths pressing against the limits of perception. You are entering the same domain he has stepped into. The shadow woman tests, measures, and transforms. She does not appear to the compliant, the ignorant, or the passive. She appears to the awakened, the questioning, the daring. And you, if you endure, are now counted among them. There is no turning back. He realized that seeing the world as it truly was carried a price no man could measure. Knowledge is not neutral, it is power, and power is responsibility. Every insight into hidden systems, every recognition of manipulation, every observation of the invisible threads connecting influence to obedience demanded vigilance. The shadow woman does not forgive inattention. She does not excuse naivety. She measures endurance, clarity, and the capacity to act without succumbing to fear or false comfort. And the man understood that he was now forever outside the world of ordinary men, existing in a domain where knowledge and consequence are inseparable. He began to feel the psychological toll. Every interaction became a test of comprehension. Every word exchanged, every gesture observed, every decision considered carried invisible weight. The more he understood, the more the burden grew. Isolation deepened. Relationships frayed. Familiar environments felt alien. Sleep was no refuge. Dreams became a battleground of insight, symbols, and fragmented truths. The shadow woman does not allow the awakened to rest. She ensures that every revelation, every observation, every recognition is internalized, measured, and integrated. The cost of seeing clearly is relentless. He noticed subtle changes in how others reacted to him. Some recoiled without knowing why. Others unconsciously deferred. Even strangers recognized the difference in energy, presence, and awareness. The awakened radiate recognition, whether they intend to or not. And with that radiance comes responsibility. One cannot simply observe from a distance. Awareness demands action. It demands vigilance. It demands adaptation to realities most men will never see. The shadow woman ensures that knowledge cannot exist without consequence, and that insight carries the weight of both understanding and isolation. He also understood the ethical burden. Awareness exposes the invisible levers of control, the mechanisms that guide thought, action, and obedience, and this knowledge can corrupt if misused. The shadow woman does not teach morality. She teaches perception. Survival, clarity, and endurance are the lessons. He had to navigate the tension between insight and action, between comprehension and restraint, between seeing clearly and remaining intact. Every decision carried moral weight, even when the world around him remained oblivious. Ignorance had been comfortable. Awareness was dangerous. And now, as you feel the intensity settling in your own mind, recognize the same responsibility awakening inside you. The shadow woman tests those who see, measures those who endure, and transforms those who survive. You are crossing thresholds few will recognize. The world you thought you knew is now a field of hidden patterns, subtle influence, and invisible rules. And you, having stepped this far, are beginning to bear the weight. There's no retreat. There's only endurance. There's only transformation. He began tracing her influence backward through history, realizing that the shadow woman was older than any institution, older than any empire, older than the stories men told themselves to feel safe. She was a principle, a force, embedded in the hidden architecture of civilization itself. Ancient civilizations left traces of her presence, rituals that shaped behavior, symbols that encoded obedience, and hierarchies that mold perception. She had been there whenever men sought knowledge beyond the ordinary, observing, measuring, testing, shaping those who dared to see too much. The further back he looked, the more he realized that no society had ever truly been free. She existed wherever insight threatened control. Kings, priests, generals, scholars, all had felt the weight of her principle, though few recognized it consciously. She operated in the spaces between vision and action, between awareness and compliance. Great thinkers had glimpsed her influence, unknowingly tested by her presence, challenged to endure truths that could unravel their assumptions. Those who failed faded into obscurity or madness. Those who endured were marked, not by fame or wealth, but by understanding, perception, and the irreversible knowledge that the world is designed to shape thought as much as it shapes behavior. He began to recognize patterns repeated through centuries: secret societies, elite councils, ritualized behavior, coded knowledge, and hidden laws. Every culture, no matter how different, carried the same principle of control, the same architecture of influence. And she had been there, guiding the testing of those who dared to challenge it. Not as a tyrant, not as an enemy, but as inevitability. The force that ensures curiosity carries cost, that awareness demands endurance, that forbidden knowledge reshapes every man who touches it. She was the measure of all who sought to step beyond the comfortable illusions. And he felt her presence more acutely than ever, knowing that he was not confronting her alone, but standing in the lineage of all who had ever crossed the line of forbidden knowledge. Her principle stretched across time, invisible yet immutable, testing the awakened mind, observing the courageous, and reshaping the few who survived. Awareness, he understood, is not modern. It is ancient. It is eternal. And to carry it is to join a history of men who saw too much, who endured too much, and who became something else entirely, shaped by insight, refined by endurance, transformed by confrontation with the shadow woman herself. And now, as you listen, feel the weight of that lineage pressing in. The awareness you are cultivating, the patterns you are beginning to see, the invisible threads you recognize, they connect you to the same principle. The shadow woman does not appear to the unaware, but to those who see. She is inevitable. She is ancient. She is measuring. She is transforming. And you, listening now, are stepping into history itself, into a current of forbidden knowledge that stretches across millennia, waiting to see if you can endure. He began to feel the convergence of past and present. The knowledge the shadow woman revealed was not merely theoretical. It was living, active, and timeless. The same patterns that shaped empires, guided hierarchies, and molded human perception centuries ago now pulsed through the modern world. Technology, media, politics, even the structure of thought itself, all carried the echoes of ancient control. She showed him that insight is not linear. It is cumulative. Each revelation, each observation, each piece of forbidden understanding added layers to perception, merging the wisdom of the past with the clarity of the present. The man felt his own mind evolving. He could see how ancient symbols and modern mechanisms were aligned, how rituals and institutions had been refined, and how obedience was cultivated across centuries. Patterns repeated, invisible yet unmistakable. And in recognizing them, he became part of a continuum. The shadow woman ensured that those who awaken do not merely survive. They integrate knowledge across time, connecting insight from forgotten civilizations with the subtle currents of contemporary influence. He was no longer just a man of the present. He was a witness to history, a participant in the architecture of awareness, and a guardian of forbidden truths. Yet the burden of awareness was undeniable. Every revelation intensified the isolation, magnified the vigilance, and sharpened the necessity for precision. He could not ignore subtle cues, unspoken hierarchies, or the invisible levers of control. The world seemed to tremble beneath his perception, shifting imperceptibly in response to his awareness. And the shadow woman, as ever, remained both guide and judge, measuring endurance, patience, and capacity to integrate ancient insight without fracturing under its weight. Knowledge was a tool, yes, but also a relentless demand on the psyche. He realized that few could bear the fusion of eras in perception. Most men live comfortably in the present, untethered from history, blind to the systems that shaped them. He, however, was bound by awareness to see both past and present simultaneously. He had glimpsed the machinery of empires and the architecture of influence in his own life, and the shadow woman pressed him further, testing how deeply he could sustain this dual consciousness without succumbing to fear, doubt, or despair. Transformation, he now understood, requires endurance across time, across perception, across self. And now, as you feel this settling within your own mind, sense the fusion of what you know with what has always been hidden. The invisible threads of influence, the patterns repeated across centuries, the structures of control, these are not distant. They are present. They are active. And you, stepping further into this story, are beginning to integrate awareness in the same way he has. The shadow woman watches. She measures. She transforms. And your journey is now irreversibly entwined with the weight of insight. He realized that the greatest threat was not external. It was internal. The shadow woman does not need to appear physically to dominate the mind. She exists in the architecture of thought, in the fractures of certainty, in the unacknowledged corners of fear. Every revelation, every insight, every forbidden truth became a mirror of himself. And in that mirror, he confronted the raw, unvarnished reality of his own mind, its weaknesses, its blind spots, its shadows. Most men never look there. Most men avoid that reflection. He could not. And that is why she remained, not as an enemy, but as a crucible. Fear had transformed from instinct to instrument. It was no longer a reaction. It was a tool to test his endurance. Every subtle doubt, every hesitation, every instinctive response became a measurement. Could he act without falling prey to old assumptions? Could he observe without letting revelation destabilize him? Could he carry the weight of forbidden knowledge without succumbing to paralysis? The shadow woman's presence amplified every internal conflict, not to destroy him, but to refine him, to mold him into something beyond the ordinary, beyond the obedient, beyond the constrained. He began to feel the irreversible nature of transformation. Knowledge could not be returned. Insight could not be unlearned. Every pattern he had seen, every hidden system he had traced, every historical echo he had connected pressed against his consciousness with relentless weight. Sleep offered no escape. Silence offered no comfort. Even thought itself demanded vigilance. She had made him conscious in a way few men would ever endure, and now she measured whether he could sustain it, whether he could navigate the invisible currents of power, influence, and human behavior while retaining his own sense of self. And yet, in this crucible, he discovered a form of liberation. Awareness, once accepted with discipline, became a weapon, a shield, and a guide. Fear was no longer a limitation. It was a lens. Isolation became clarity. Observation became insight. And he understood the truth. The shadow woman does not destroy those who endure. She transforms them. She reveals the world's hidden structures, tests the strength of perception, and leaves behind a man who is no longer defined by ignorance, but by the mastery of understanding. And now, as you feel this settling within your own consciousness, recognize the internal challenge that awaits you. Fear is inevitable. Isolation is inevitable. Knowledge carries weight. But the shadow woman does not punish. She awakens. She measures. She transforms. And you, listening now, aware of the hidden structures, aware of the pressure of insight, aware of the cost of knowing, are stepping into that same crucible. The descent continues, and the transformation deepens. He felt the full force of inevitability pressing upon him. The shadow woman was no longer a distant presence, a test from the edges of perception. She had become the framework of his consciousness itself. Every thought, every observation, every perception was filtered through her principle. The weight of awareness had transformed from burden into constant companion, demanding vigilance, demanding endurance, demanding mastery. She did not speak. She did not act. She simply existed as the measure of a man who had crossed beyond the ordinary, beyond obedience, beyond ignorance. He realized that resistance was no longer an option. Attempting to reject her influence was futile, because she existed not outside him, but inside. She was the inevitable consequence of crossing boundaries, of seeking forbidden knowledge, of seeing the invisible threads of control. And as he accepted her presence, he understood the paradox. The more he surrendered to awareness, the more control he gained. The shadow woman does not destroy. She reshapes. She forces the mind to endure, to integrate, to survive the weight of truth without fracturing. The man felt the culmination of centuries of hidden patterns, of invisible hierarchies, of unspoken rules. Knowledge of history, of systems, of human behavior, of influence and manipulation, all converged into a single clarity. He could trace the machinery of control in ancient civilizations and in the present day, in whispered rituals,